Did you know that the birth of the Catholic Church is far more complex than simply the teachings of Jesus? While many see Christ's ministry as the foundation, the true formation of the Church was a tangled journey involving politics, power struggles, and divine inspiration. From the moment Jesus was crucified, the question wasn't just about who would lead the followers, but how they would define themselves in a world dominated by the Roman Empire. The first Christians were not thinking of a single, unified church, they were thinking of survival. The story of Christianity's origins begins with the radical teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, whose message of love, compassion, and a kingdom not of this world seemed too dangerous to the Roman authorities. Jesus' crucifixion, however, didn't mark the end of his message, but sparked the beginning of an enduring spiritual revolution. His apostles and disciples, despite the risks, started spreading his teachings, each interpreting them in their own way. The early Christians, initially a small Jewish sect, were faced with the monumental task of defining themselves against both Roman paganism and Jewish traditions. This early church, however, wasn't always the institution we recognize today. For the first few centuries, the Christian community was decentralized, consisting of small house churches and gatherings. Each area had its own leaders, usually elders or bishops, who helped guide their local flock. But over time, something began to emerge: unity. The church started to take shape as a more formal organization, influenced by both theological debates and the political realities of the Roman Empire. The role of Saint Peter, often considered the first pope, began to solidify the idea of a central authority. But what you may never have been told is that the true consolidation of the church's power wasn't just spiritual, but also deeply political. The early church had to navigate not only theological differences, but also the relentless pressures of the Roman Empire, which, after initial persecutions, would eventually adopt Christianity as the official religion in 380 AD. This shift marked a profound transformation, from being persecuted outsiders to becoming the empire's established faith. The question was no longer about survival, but about how to wield immense political power. As the Christian faith began to spread, it faced both external and internal challenges. By the 4th century, Christianity had grown from a small Jewish sect into a burgeoning religious movement that reached across the Roman Empire. However, the rapid growth brought with it new complexities: divergent interpretations of Christian doctrine, regional disputes over authority, and a need for formalized beliefs. The church was at a crossroads, and the question of unity would shape its future. The first significant event in this process of consolidation was the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, convened by the Roman Emperor Constantine. The council aimed to address the divisive issue of Arianism, a belief that Jesus was not fully divine, but rather a created being. The controversy surrounding this belief threatened to split the Christian community. Constantine, having recently converted to Christianity, saw the unity of the church as essential for the stability of the empire, and he sought to define orthodox belief once and for all. The result was the Nicene Creed, a statement of faith that affirmed the full divinity of Christ and established a foundational belief for the church. Following Nicaea, other councils were held to address various theological disputes. The Council of Constantinople in 381 AD reaffirmed the Nicene Creed and further developed the doctrine of the Trinity, while the Council of Ephesus in 431 AD clarified the nature of Christ, defining him as both fully divine and fully human. These early councils set the stage for the development of the Church's theological framework, helping to shape its identity in the centuries that followed. What is often overlooked is that these councils weren't just theological debates, they were also deeply political. Emperors and bishops vied for power, and the outcomes of these meetings often had as much to do with consolidating political influence as with clarifying doctrine. The decisions made at these councils would continue to influence not only Christian belief but also the very structure of the church itself. As Christianity solidified its theological foundations in the early centuries, the church's organizational structure began to evolve. By the time of the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century, the papacy had emerged as the central institution of the Catholic Church, with Rome as its epicenter. The role of the Pope, once a position among many bishops, began to take on greater significance. The Pope was increasingly seen as the supreme spiritual authority, a direct successor to St. Peter, whose authority had been established by Jesus Christ himself. This shift towards papal primacy was not immediate or without contention. Early popes had to navigate a tumultuous period in history, with the fall of the Roman Empire plunging Europe into political fragmentation. As the Roman Empire's central authority waned, the papacy not only became the religious leader of Christendom but also the de facto ruler in many parts of Europe. The Church provided stability in a time of chaos, and the papacy became a unifying force, both politically and spiritually. During the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church reached the height of its power. Under the leadership of powerful popes such as Gregory I and Leo III, the papacy expanded its influence far beyond the walls of Rome. The papacy forged key alliances with European monarchs, at times even asserting its authority over kings and emperors. One of the most notable events was the coronation of Charlemagne as Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire by Pope Leo III in 800 AD, symbolizing the close relationship between the Church and the Empire. However, this rise to power did not come without controversy. The Church's wealth and influence often led to corruption, and the role of the Pope was frequently entangled in political intrigue. This period marked the beginning of a complex relationship between the papacy and European rulers that would shape the course of medieval history for centuries to come. By the 11th century, the Catholic Church had established itself as a powerful institution, but it was also facing new challenges. The rapid expansion of Islam had created a significant presence in the Mediterranean and beyond, and the Church saw it as its mission to reclaim Christian lands. The Crusades, a series of religious wars launched by the papacy, were the Church's response to this perceived threat. These campaigns, which lasted for several centuries, would not only shape the political and religious landscape of Europe, but also leave a profound legacy on the Church itself. The First Crusade, initiated in 1096 by Pope Urban II, was framed as a holy mission to liberate Jerusalem from Muslim control. Urban's call for war resonated with a European populace eager for religious zeal and territorial expansion. Thousands of knights and peasants took up the cross, not only to secure Christian holy sites but also to gain land, wealth, and power. The successful capture of Jerusalem in 1099 was seen as a miraculous triumph for the Church, and it marked the beginning of a series of crusades aimed at solidifying Christian control over the Holy Land. However, the Crusades were not solely about religion, they also had deeply political and economic motivations. The Church's role in these wars was often entangled with the ambitions of kings and nobles seeking to expand their territories. In many cases, the Church provided both spiritual justification and material support as it sought to bolster its influence and authority in Europe and the Holy Land. The Crusades also led to significant cultural exchanges between the Christian and Muslim worlds, resulting in the transfer of knowledge, goods, and technologies that would later influence the Renaissance. Despite the Church's early successes in the Crusades, the long-term effects were more complicated. The failure to maintain control over Jerusalem and the subsequent weakening of Christian power in the region revealed the limits of papal authority. Nonetheless, the Crusades had far-reaching consequences for the development of the Catholic Church, influencing its relationship with secular powers and setting the stage for future religious conflicts. By the 16th century, the Catholic Church, once a dominant force in Europe, was beginning to face serious internal turmoil. The clergy's moral and spiritual authority had been called into question, and widespread dissatisfaction with church practices was growing. The tipping point came when Martin Luther, a German monk, posted his 95 Theses in 1517, challenging the church's sale of indulgences and other practices he deemed corrupt. Luther's protest ignited the Protestant Reformation, a religious revolution that would forever alter the landscape of Christianity. Luther's ideas spread rapidly, fueled by the advent of the printing press, which allowed his writings to reach a broad audience. He argued that salvation came through faith alone, rather than through church rituals, and emphasized the Bible as the sole source of authority. His criticism of the papacy and the hierarchical structure of the church struck a chord with many, leading to widespread dissent. Luther's Reformation not only gave birth to Lutheranism, but also inspired the rise of other Protestant denominations, such as Calvinism and Anglicanism, which rejected papal authority and sought to reform Christian practices. The Catholic Church, faced with the threat of schism, responded with the Counter-Reformation, a movement aimed at both reforming the Church internally and reaffirming its doctrines. The Council of Trent, 1545 to 1563, played a central role in this process, addressing many of the issues raised by the Reformers. The Council clarified Catholic doctrine on salvation, the sacraments, and the authority of the Pope, while also initiating reforms to curb corruption within the clergy. The Counter-Reformation also saw the rise of new religious orders, such as the Jesuits, who played a key role in revitalizing Catholicism through education and missionary work. While the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic response dramatically reshaped Christianity, the events also set the stage for centuries of religious conflict across Europe, which would challenge the authority of the Church and redefine the relationship between church and state. As the 17th and 18th centuries ushered in the Age of Enlightenment, the Catholic Church found itself at odds with an emerging wave of intellectual, scientific, and philosophical developments that challenged traditional religious authority. Enlightenment thinkers emphasized reason, individual liberty, and the pursuit of knowledge, often questioning the legitimacy of the Church's power and its influence over society. Philosophers such as Voltaire and Rousseau criticized the Church's role in political matters, advocating for secularism and the separation of church and state. One of the most significant challenges to the Church's authority during this period was the rise of scientific discoveries that contradicted long-held religious views. Figures like Galileo Galilei and Isaac Newton revolutionized our understanding of the natural world, yet their findings often put them in direct conflict with church doctrine. Galileo's support for the heliocentric model, which placed the sun at the center of the solar system, was condemned by the Catholic Church in 1633 as heretical, and he was forced to recant his views under threat of punishment. This episode underscored the tension between scientific inquiry and religious dogma that would define much of the Enlightenment era. Despite these challenges, the Catholic Church adapted in various ways. Pope Pius IX, for example, during the mid-19th century, issued the Syllabus of Errors in 1864, condemning the rise of liberalism and modernism. However, the Church also sought to engage with the new intellectual currents, with some popes, like Leo XIII, promoting social teaching that addressed issues such as workers' rights and the role of the Church in a rapidly changing world. The 19th and early 20th centuries saw the Catholic Church come to terms with the reality of modernity. In the face of growing secularism, the Church worked to reassert its place in a world increasingly indifferent to religious influence, setting the stage for the challenges and reforms that would define the 20th century. The mid-20th century marked a period of profound transformation within the Catholic Church, as it grappled with both internal and external pressures for reform. One of the most pivotal moments in this era was the Second Vatican Council, 1962 to 1965, a landmark event convened by Pope John XI. Vatican I aimed to modernize the Church's relationship with the world and adapt its teachings to the realities of the post-war era. It sought to open the doors of the Church, engaging more deeply with modern culture and fostering ecumenism or cooperation with other Christian denominations. One of the most significant changes introduced by Vatican I I was the shift in the Church's liturgy. For centuries, the Mass had been celebrated in Latin, a practice that alienated many laypeople from understanding the rituals. Vatican I authorized the use of vernacular languages in the liturgy, making the Mass more accessible and inclusive for worshippers worldwide. This was a revolutionary change, marking the end of a centuries-old tradition and emphasizing the importance of active participation by the laity. Another key development of Vatican I was the Church's approach to interfaith dialogue. Previously, the Catholic Church had maintained a position of doctrinal superiority, but the Council emphasized the need for respect and collaboration with other religions, particularly Judaism and Islam. This shift helped foster a more inclusive attitude, leading to significant changes in the Church's stance toward other faiths and communities. The Council also addressed social issues, advocating for the dignity of the human person, religious freedom, and the importance of justice in the world. The Church's teachings on social responsibility gained prominence. As leaders like Pope Paul VI and later Pope John Paul II called for greater engagement with poverty, inequality, and human rights. While Vatican I brought about significant change, it also sparked tensions within the Church. Many traditionalists resisted these reforms, leading to ongoing debates over the direction of the Church in the modern world. Nonetheless, the Second Vatican Council remains one of the most important moments in the history of Catholicism, reshaping the Church's role in the global community. Fast forward to the present day, and the Catholic Church finds itself navigating a landscape dramatically different from the one it encountered just a few decades ago. With over 1 billion members worldwide, the Church remains one of the largest and most influential religious institutions on earth. Yet, in a world where secularism continues to rise, and where rapid technological, cultural, and political shifts are reshaping every aspect of life, the Church faces an ongoing struggle to maintain its relevance. One of the most pressing issues for the Church today is its response to the growing secularization of society. In many parts of the world, faith is increasingly seen as a private matter, with fewer people attending Mass or identifying with organized religion. This trend has led the Church to rethink its approach to evangelization, social issues, and even its internal structures. Pope Francis, the current leader of the Church, has made efforts to modernize the image of the papacy, promoting a message of humility, inclusiveness, and compassion. His focus on issues like poverty, climate change, and migration reflects a shift in the Church's priorities, positioning itself as a voice for the marginalized and a force for global social justice. However, the Church is also confronted with a series of deep, internal challenges. The sexual abuse crisis, which has rocked the Church for decades, continues to cast a shadow over its moral authority. The Church's handling of this issue has led to widespread criticism, loss of trust among its followers, and calls for greater accountability and transparency. This scandal has forced the Church to confront uncomfortable truths about its past and reassess its future. Despite these challenges, the Church's influence remains undeniable. In an era of increasing global interconnectedness, the Vatican continues to be a powerful diplomatic and moral voice on the world stage. The Church's stance on social issues, such as the sanctity of life, marriage, and family, continues to spark heated debates, but its reach into the hearts and minds of millions is unmatched. In the end, the Catholic Church remains a complex institution rooted in ancient traditions, yet constantly evolving in response to the ever-changing world around it. Its history is a tale of triumph, conflict, and adaptation, and its journey is far from over. So what does the future hold for the Catholic Church? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: it will continue to play a significant role in shaping the moral and spiritual landscape of our world. If you enjoyed learning about the untold story of the Catholic Church and its fascinating evolution, don't forget to subscribe for more insights on history, faith, and the institutions that have shaped our world.